What's up everybody, it's Joe here with Joseph Blake Photography, and in today's video, I'm out here in Carlsbad, California. I'm actually doing family portraits. It's the busy season, but the reason that I wanted to make this video is to talk about a potential new sensor from Canon that is super high resolution, and a new feature coming to a pretty popular Canon camera that might actually be huge for people using it. So again, my name is Joe. I am a portrait and landscape photographer here in, well, I'm normally in Las Vegas, Nevada, but today I'm in Carlsbad, California. But this is my channel, Joseph Blake Photography, where we talk about tech and gear and news and creating content. If that's the kind of thing that you're into, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if at the end of the video you think I've done a good job, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button. So we know that resolution isn't necessarily king, but it can definitely help, especially when you've got technology inside your camera that allows you to take all of those pixels and sometimes kind of smash them together to get the best version. And we're seeing more and more of that in smaller sensors for things like drones and phones. Those have been things that we've seen for quite some time. But now we've got an announcement from Canon about a 250 megapixel sensor. It is in the APS-H size, which if you remember back to the DSLR days, we've had some 1D series cameras that had that type of technology in them. And while this particular sensor is definitely not going to be making its way into a consumer product, it's actually more likely going to end up in a satellite in space looking down for things like Google Maps. It's definitely interesting that they are pushing the PR side of this pretty heavily so that we can see, honestly, what they're capable of. So the other bit of rumor that we got from Canon is that we may potentially be getting an update to the R7, which is the top of their APS-C line. Now the R7 is a really great camera as it is an APS-C camera that has IBIS, which means that it has stabilization. So you might be asking, well, what does that matter when we're talking about a high resolution sensor? Well, Canon cameras, at least some of them, like the R5 Mark I that I have here, support a high resolution mode when using the IBIS system. It generates an image, at least here on the R5, it's almost 10 times the size of the normal image. It's 400 megapixels, but it is potentially a feature that we're going to see with the R7 with a firmware update, as that camera does support in-body image stabilization with that same 5-axis system like we have on the R5. Hold that thought, I gotta shoot this sunset. So the point that I'm trying to make, or the point that I wanted to get to, you don't need IBIS and you don't need a 250 megapixel sensor if you're shooting landscape or nature scenes. Now don't get me wrong, there are times where this doesn't work at all. But if you take your favorite, maybe mid-standard range zoom, like a 50 millimeter, I love doing this with my 70 to 200 or even an 85 mil. Stop it down to its sharpest point, put it on a tripod. Put it on a tripod and take 3 or 4 panning shots. Now, this isn't a panorama. You're not looking for a wider look necessarily. You're looking for more resolution. So that's why you're not shooting super wide. That's why you'd be shooting in a more zoomed in focal length. If you've got a 24 to 70, shoot it 50 to 70. If you got a kit lens at 18 to 55, shoot it 50, shoot it 40. That'll flatten out the view and you'll be able to get better stitches when you bring them all together. Whether it's Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever you're using, this software nowadays, honestly, is so good at stitching those things together. And you will end up with a phenomenal image. If you're shooting with, say, a 24 or 32 megapixel image, and you stack 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of those together, or 6, you're gonna end up with a better image than you potentially would have with a larger sensor and less distortion necessarily than you would get with a wider angle lens. So even though we chase resolution and we chase features like IBIS high res, try out these other features, try out these other options that are built into your camera and that have been since the cameras came out. Multi-exposure panoramas are not new, but getting yourself that wider view or that higher resolution when you don't have the higher resolution sensor or you don't have the wider lens. Go out and test it. Go out and play with it. I am very curious to see if Canon is really popularizing the fact that they are a market leader in super high resolution sensors. I wonder what that means for the future and the rumors that we have for next year that we're going to get potentially a 100 megapixel full frame sensor. Also excited for the idea of an APS-H sensor size. I think they should bring back weird sensor sizes, but that's just me. Okay, I'm gonna pack things up. If this was interesting to you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and hit like. Thanks so much. I'll be back in Vegas this week. See you next time. Bye.